Rumi was a Persian-speaking poet, and he was a Muslim mystic. He was a Sufi, as they usually call this religious slash spiritual movement. He not only belonged to the Sufi tradition, he created a Sufi order that followed him for centuries after his death. And he was a religious man, as his works clearly show us, in spite of what the Western portrayal of his work may suggest. Rumi has two main collections of poetry. One is the Masnavi, which is a collection of um, parables and religious sermons designed specifically for gatherings of Sufis where he would recite his work as for pedantic reasons, so to say. And the other work is the collection of Ghazals. His collection of Ghazals, Ghazal being something like a sonnet maybe, um, is very different from the Masnavi, that it's full of love and passion, and it seems to be spontaneous. It talks about Rumi's feelings. There's no specific audience in mind, in Rumi's mind, as far as we can tell. It is all or mostly about this particular character, Shams. Shams being Rumi's closest friend, the person Rumi loves, and the person who has had the most impact on him. It seems like the Rumi we know is the product of his encounter with Shams. He would not be the person we know him to be, and he would not probably produce these works if he had not met with Shams. He basically saw Shams when he was already a grown man. He was a pious man, a well-known religious teacher in Konya, today's Turkey. He saw Shams, a Sufi, probably older than him, and he basically fell in love. And he fell in love so badly that, and he spent so much of his time with Shams, forgetting about everything else, that his disciples, his friends, his family were angry at Shams. And there's a lot of drama going on, as we can see in the works of the people who lived at the time, between Rumi's older acquaintances. By older, I mean who knew him before Shams appeared, who were jealous of Shams. They thought that this stranger man has come, has stolen our master's heart. He's a strange man. He has harsh manners, and he seems to have done things to him. Our master seems to have lost his mind. He's just absorbed in this new stranger guy who's not very refined and not necessarily very knowledgeable. He seems like an ordinary old Sufi guy. So you should imagine the atmosphere in Konya around Rumi at the time. This venerable man, Rumi, has fallen in love, as weird as it may sound. And of course, what we mean by love here is very different from the romantic love that we know today. At least that's the common understanding within the Muslim tradition. And he's forgotten his old ways, and he's acting strangely. It's causing a lot of shame for him in a way, because he was a respected man who does not act in a respected manner anymore. So this encounter with Shams, as odd as it may sound, was what changed Rumi's life, and what probably resulted in the creation of the poetic works that we know, and was what caused the mystic order, the Sufi order, that was built around Rumi, which lasted for centuries. So we don't know a lot about Shams, although we do have a collection of his sermons. Most of what we do know about him, other than that, comes either from Rumi or people very close to Rumi. Now, the poem we're going to read today is about this important incident in Rumi's life. It's one of his Ghazals. As I said, the Ghazals are about Rumi's passion and feelings. It's not a sermon, it's not a story. It's a love poem. And it describes, according to tradition, the encounter between Rumi and Shams and the way it changed his life and the way it made Rumi the man that he became. So let's start reading the actual poem. مرده bodam zende shodam gerye bodam khande shodam دولت eshgh āmad و من dowlat-e pāyande shodam. So let's go through these words one by one. Morde means dead. مرده bodam, I was dead. Pretty straightforward for anyone who speaks some basic Persian, other than the fact that instead of bodam, which is what you would expect to see as the past tense for the verb to be, you have bodam. So instead of morde bodam, which is the way it's pronounced in modern Persian, the Iranian dialect, of course, you have morde bodam. And I should probably give a heads up that I'm pronouncing his poetry with my own accent, which is the Tehrani accent, the standard, so to say, accent of the Iranian dialect of the language. Now, Rumi was not from the area that is known today as Iran. He was from somewhere in today's Afghanistan, and both because of his birthplace, which is different than mine, and because he lived almost 800 years ago, he used a different accent of Persian. So the way he pronounced these words is different. I'm just not going to try to read the whole thing in his accent, but it is quite different. So instead of مرده bodam zende shodam gerye bodam khande shodam, it would sound something like مرده bodam zinde shodam gerye bodam khande shodam. Now, I'm not doing it well, but you can see the differences in the vowels, of course. So, yeah, I apologize for that. So, مرده bodam zende shodam. I was dead, I became alive. gerye bodam khande shodam. I was weeping, I became laughter. Now, gerye is a noun, so when I say weeping, I mean weeping as a noun. I don't mean I was weeping as I was doing the action of weeping. I was weeping itself. I was the action of weeping. And I became laughter, not that I started laughing. Now, how much you want to read into this innovation, how much you want to look at it as a literary aesthetic device, how much you want to look at it as having important semantic contributions to what he's trying to say, or how much you want to see it as just metrical exigencies pushing Rumi towards saying it this way. I don't really want to judge about that. I'll talk about poetic meter at the end of this presentation, but for now, just know that meter is an important factor that should be taken into account when we're reading his poetry and we're deciding about his choices of vocabulary. مرده bodam zende shodam gerye bodam khande shodam دولت eshgh āmad و من دولت پاینده shodam. Dowlat in modern Persian means government, but it doesn't mean government in Rumi's language. It means prosperity or fortune or happiness. So dowlat-e eshgh is the fortune of love. It's a simile basically. So love is similar to fortune. The fortune, which is love, came, and I became the eternal fortune. Again, I did not become the owner of this fortune. I became this fortune. So the whole verse says, I was dead, I became alive. I was weeping, I became laughter. The fortune that is love came, and I became the eternal fortune. To summarize, I became happy. I was a miserable man, and I became a happy man, happier than you can imagine. So tradition has it, as we said before, that this poem is describing his encounter with Shams. He saw Shams, and this meeting changed his life from being a miserable man to being the happy man that he became. دیده سیر است مرا، جان دلیر است مرا، زهره شیر است مرا، زهره تابنده شدم. دیده سیر است مرا means I have eyes that are full. I have eyes that are not hungry. So dide literally means the thing that has seen, but it has come to mean just eyes, especially in poetry. Sir is the opposite of hungry. So when I say full, I don't mean full as the opposite of empty. It's the opposite of hungry. So dide sir means an eye that is not hungry, meaning an eye that is not looking for anything else, an eye that is content. Now, the syntactic structure of this part is a little strange for someone who's only seen modern Persian. Dide sir ast marā. There are two things to note here. First, marā, it's a combination of the words man and ra. So marā basically means man ra, man being I, and ra being the word that is usually called the object marker in modern Persian. But the second issue going on is that ra is not an object marker necessarily in Rumi's times. And this is not just in poetry. This is just a property of early New Persian, or classical New Persian, maybe a more appropriate name for the variety of language we're talking about. Here, a probably helpful literal translation would be, it is for me, or it is to me. So, dide sir ast marā means the non-hungry eye is to me. The eye that is not looking for new things is for me. It belongs to me. To be more technical, ra is a dative marker here. So those who are familiar with either linguistics in general or classical languages like Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit know what a dative case is. Otherwise, don't worry, really, it doesn't matter. The point is that here, marā means to me. So this eye is to me or for me, meaning that it belongs to me. So I have this eye that is not looking for anything else. جان دلیر است مرا. Again, a similar syntactic structure. John means soul. It's definitely different in connotations, and its semantic realm is not exactly the same as English soul, but it's a good estimate. What really makes you, other than your body, is your John. Of course, it depends on interpretations. Some people consider there to be three components to your being: your John, your body, and your thought, Ravan. But that's a different issue. In Rumi's work, it is usually the case that John is the opposite of tan, which means body. So it's the non-corporal side of your existence. Jane dalir ast marā means I have a soul that is brave. So he's attributing two qualities to himself in this whole verse. Dide sir ast marā, jane dalir ast marā. I have eyes that are not looking for anything else, and I have a heart, I have a soul that is brave. So it's as if I don't need anything else. I'm happy with what I have, and I'm brave. I can do things that I couldn't do before, which makes sense given the context that I just told you about his encounter with Shams and how it led him towards a life that needed courage. زهره شیر است مرا زهره تابنده شدم. I have the bravery of a lion. زهره is a part of the animal's body, but in practice it just means bravery. So I have the bravery of a lion. And finally, زهره تابنده شدم. I became the shining Venus. زهره means Venus and تابنده means shining. Now, an interesting point to note is the similarity between the words زهره and زهره in this verse. زهره شیر است مرا زهره تابنده شدم. Obviously, he's playing with the words, right? And another point to note is a morphological one. So تابنده means shining. Tab is the verbal stem to shine, and ande is the suffix that's attached to the end of it to mean the thing that is doing it. Tab, shine, tabande, shining. We had a similar structure in the previous verse where it said dowlat-e pāyande shodam. I became the eternal fortune. Pāyande, again, is one of these structures. Pāy is the verbal stem meaning to endure, and ande, adding to it, means enduring. گفت که دیوانه نی لایق این خانه نی رفتم و دیوانه شدم سلسله بندنده شدم. گفت means he said or she said, but I'm going to translate all of these as he, assuming that we're talking about Shams as the third person. گفت که, he said that, دیوانه نی, you are not crazy. Nei is strange for those familiar with modern Persian. You would expect nisti. This is just an alternative form that is found, seems to be in free variation with nisti in Persian poetry. So گفت که دیوانه نی, which would be گفت که دیوانه نیستی in modern Persian, simply means he said you are not crazy. لایق این خانه نی. لایق means deserving. Deserving of this house you are not. You do not deserve this house. Obviously, we should have a metaphorical understanding of what house means here. It probably means the position that Shams has in mind. Shams is telling Rumi that you just don't deserve this position that I have in mind. And why is that? Because you're not crazy. Let's go back to the context of the poem. Rumi has this respected, ordinary life as a teacher. And what Shams is asking of him seems to be the life of a real Sufi, or maybe even beyond that. The life of a lover who seems to be crazy and who does not do things the way respected people do. گفت که دیوانه نی لایق این خانه نی رفتم و دیوانه شدم سلسله بندنده شدم. So رفتم simply means I went. O and دیوانه شدم, I became crazy. سلسله بندنده شدم. Silsile is an Arabic word meaning chain. Bandande means one who fastens. Again, a structure composed of the verbal stem band and the suffix ande. I became one who fastens chains. I became one who ties up chains. But this sounds a little unexpected. What he actually means is that he means I became one who is tied up in chains. Or I became crazy. So it's based on this old tradition of tying up crazy people or mentally ill people who were assumed to be dangerous. And now may be a good time to also talk about the rhyme in this poem. So as you see, at the end of each pair of verses, which are usually written in one line, in the Persian poetic tradition. You have this ande shodam part, so the word changes, pāyande, tابنده, bandande, and the second word is always shodam. Now, this is a weird type of rhyme for people who are familiar with almost any other poetic tradition. It's rather a peculiarity of the Persian poetic tradition where you have this word here, shodam, repeating after the rhyme word. Now, this is not necessary, but it's actually very common in Persian poetry. Leaving that word aside, the word before it is actually the rhyme word that you would expect in any poetic tradition. However, it is probably interesting, this form of rhyme arrangement for speakers of English, as the rhyme repeats itself. The whole poem is based on the same rhyme, pāyande, tابنده, bandande, and it goes on until the end of the poem, which has many verses. So that's one issue. And the other point to note is that within each verse, you also see a rhyme. Now, this is not mandatory. This is something Rumi is doing here to just make his poem even more appealing. گفت که دیوانه نئی لایق این خانه نئی. You see what he's doing. Again, nei is this additional word which is called radif after the rhyme word, which is repeated exactly as is. And then divane and khane are those rhyming words within this verse. گفت که سرمست نی رو که از این دست نی رفتم و سرمست شدم و از طرب آکنده شدم. He told me, you're not drunk. رو, it means go. So in modern Persian, it would be boro with the prefix bo in the beginning. But in classical Persian, the prefix could easily be deleted. It depends on some rather complicated syntactic factors that I don't really want to delve into, but they're not in free variation. There is a difference between ro and boro in classical Persian, but in some contexts they can be used interchangeably. So don't try this at home when you're composing your own Persian poetry. Don't just use them interchangeably. رو که از این دست نی. Go, because. So here ke should be translated as because rather than that. And this is a difference between classical Persian and New Persian. In New Persian, ke hardly ever means because. So go, because from this hand you are not. This, of course, is a idiomatic use of the word hand. You are not from this hand means you are not of the right type. You're not of this type. So, ro ke az in dast nei. Go, because you're not of this type, because you don't belong to the thing that I have in mind. رفتم و سرمست شدم و از طرب آکنده شدم. I went and I became drunk and I became full of happiness. Now the last part is linguistically a little difficult. Vaz is composed of two words. It's va plus as. Va meaning and as meaning from. So the combination means and from. Tarab is an Arabic word meaning happiness, which is not used in ordinary context. It's mostly a literary word. And khande is also rather formal, meaning full. I became full of, I became laden with happiness. So the happiness is talking about, of course, is the happiness of having met Shams. گفت که تو کشته نئی در طرب آغشته نئی پیش رخ زنده کنش کشته و افکنده شدم. He said, you're not dead, or more literally, you're not killed, you've not been killed. در طرب آغشته نئی, or as it's more commonly pronounced today, آغشته, but I want to keep the rhyme with kushte, right? So you're not soaking in happiness. Tarab we saw it already in the previous line, meaning happiness, and eshgh meaning soaking. پیش رخ زنده کنش کشته و افکنده شدم. پیش, in front of, رخ, the face, زنده کنش, zende kon being a compound made of zende, which means alive, and kon, which is the stem of to do. So zende kon together means the one that makes alive. رخ زنده کنش, his alive-making face. So in front of his face that makes alive, کشته و افکنده شدم. I became killed and afkande, which means one who has been thrown. So I was killed and thrown in front of his face, and his face happens to be one that makes things alive. Again, the whole metaphor is describing his experience in a mysterious way. He's seeing this whole experience as dying and then becoming alive again. He dies and then Shams gives him another life. And for Shams to give him this new life, he has to die. And it seems that it has to be his own decision. So Shams simply tells him, you haven't been killed, so you're not good enough. You're not killed and you're not full of happiness, so you're not good enough. So Rumi kills himself, metaphorically, in order for Shams to give him this new life. گفت که تو زیرککی مست خیالی و شکی گول شدم هول شدم و از همه برکنده شدم. He told me that you're smart. Zirak means smart. Zirakak is just a diminutive form of the word. So he told me that you're smart and you're drunk with thoughts and with suspicions. Khiyal means imagination or thought, things that you imagine, your ideas. And you're drunk with ideas and with imaginations. And with shak, shak meaning suspicion, not being sure. So he's basically, it seems that he is questioning his approach to life and religion. He doesn't want him to think in the way he does analytically. At least that's what it seems to be the case. What seems to be the case, especially when you look at his other poems and the Masnavi. It seems that Shams is inviting him towards following his heart more and his analytical thinking less. Mast khiyali yoshaki means drunkard of imagination you are, and suspicion you are. So you see he's using the second person to be verb e twice, once after khiyal, imagination, and one after suspicion. گفت که تو زیرککی مست خیالی و شکی گول شدم هول شدم و از همه برکنده شدم. Gul means stupid. I became stupid. I became dumb. Hol شدم. Now this is a little strange. Hol is supposed to mean either significant or fear, but here none of the meanings seems to work, and the sound of gul just makes me think that this should have been pronounced hul, so that there's some inner rhyme in the verse going on. But I don't really know, and I couldn't find anything convincing regarding the meaning of this word. So I prefer to refrain from giving a translation and not go into giving far-fetched interpretations of this phrase. و از همه برکنده شدم. Vaz again meaning va as or and from, همه, everyone or everything, literally all. Barkande, detached. So khande means plucked or removed, khande makes the meaning, the verbal prefix bar makes the meaning more abstract. So khande is detached. So I became detached from all. So to review the verse, he told me that you're smart and you have a lot of ideas and a lot of suspicions, and I became dumb. I put away all of those ideas and suspicions, and I became detached from everything. گفت که تو شمع شدی، قبله این جمع شدی، جمع نیم شمع نیم دود پراکنده شدم. He told me you became a candle. قبله این جمع. So قبله is an Islamic term meaning the direction of the Kaaba, the direction of the city of Mecca where Muslims turn towards for praying. You became the Qibla of this gathering, of this community. So you became the person to whom everyone pays respect and the person to whom everyone turns to worship, although he doesn't mean it in the literal sense. What he means is that everyone is looking up to you. You've become a leader. And you've become a candle, and the point of the candle is that it's in the middle, it's put in the middle of a gathering in a room, and everyone looks at it, and it's at the center of attention. So you became a candle, and you became a qibla for this community. And now, again, Rumi's report of what he did in response to Shams's worry is, Jam niyam, sham niyam, dude parakande shodam. I'm not a gathering. Sham niyam, I'm not a candle. Dude parakande shodam. I became dispersed smoke. Dude meaning smoke and parakande meaning dispersed. گفت که شیخی و سری پیش رو راه بری شیخ نیم پیش نیم امر تو را بنده شدم. He told me you're a sheikh, S-H-E-I-K-H, used a lot in English as well to describe old venerable leaders, mostly religious in the Islamic world. So he told me that you're a leader. And you're a sar meaning head again. You're a leader and a head. You're a chief and a head. Pish ro rah bari. Pish ro. Pish means front. And ro is the verbal stem for to go. So the present stem to be more specific. Pish ro means one who moves in the front. The one who is forward. The one whom everyone else follows. Rah bar has a similar meaning. Rah means path, and bar means it's the verbal stem for to carry. So rahbar is the person who carries the way, carries the path, meaning leads the path. So pishro and rahbar both mean leader. Pishro rahbari, you're the leader. Sheikh niyam, pish niyam, amr to ra bande shodam. I'm not a sheikh. I'm not in the front. Amrito, your command. Ra here again is not it's not an object marker, it's a genitive marker, meaning it's showing possession of a kind. So amrito ra bande in modern Persian would be bande amrito, the servant of your command. But here you could also read it as Amrito, your command. Ra, for your command. Bande shodam, I became a servant. And finally, this is the last verse that I'm going to read today. And having read this, I would say we've covered the most famous part of this quite famous poem. گفت که با بال و پری من پر و بالت ندهم در هوس بال و پرش بی پر و پرکنده شدم. Bal means wing in singular, and par means feather. Bal و par is wing and feather, collectively just meaning wings. So he told me you are with wings. گفت که, he said that, با, with, بال و پر, wings, you are. من پر و بالت ندهم. I'm not going to give you wings. So let's look at this in terms of syntax. The modern Persian version for this would be من به تو پر و بال نمیدهم. A lot of differences, right? So first of all, پر و بالت, here at, the suffix is a personal pronoun for second person singular. So it's to you. This usage of the personal pronoun is obsolete. It's no longer there in modern Persian, but it's quite common in classical Persian. So I wings to you. Man parobalat. Nadaham. Again, in modern Persian, this would be said differently. It would be nemidaham. The verbal prefix mi would be necessary here in modern Persian, but it's optional or half optional in classical Persian. So nadaham is I do not give, or I shall not give. Again, there's no clear distinction between the subjunctive and the indicative in classical Persian. But the gist of this is, I'm not going to give you wings because you already have wings. در هوس بال و پرش بی پر و پرکنده شدم. In the desire of his wings, that is the wings that he would give me, bī par. Bī is a prefix meaning without, and par is feathers. So without feathers. O parkande. Par again means feathers, and kande, we've already seen this word. So we had barkande, meaning detached. And I told you kande means removed. Here parkande means feather removed. One whose feathers are removed. So در هوس بال و پرش بی پر و پرکنده شدم. In the desire of his wings, or his wing and feather, without feather and feather removed, I became. So the gist of the whole verse is that he told me, since you already have wings, here wing probably referring to his high social status and the way of religious life that he has and the kind of partial happiness that he has. Since you have these wings, I'm not going to give you wings. And then Rumi's response, like the previous verses, is that, okay, I'm going to get rid of these wings. I don't want what I already have. I want to detach everything that I have from me so that you give me wings. In other poems, Rumi describes his attitude towards Shams, the way of life that Shams has presented him, as a kind of gamble. He's losing everything that he already has in the hope of finding something that is much more desirable and much more enduring. So he's losing his wings, he's losing his social status, he's no longer a candle, he's no longer smart, he's no longer alive, he becomes killed. So he pretty much loses everything that he has intentionally to find this new life that Shams is going to give him. And of course, everyone is blaming him for his seemingly stupid decision, which of course seems not to be so stupid after all, since he does seem to have found happiness after his encounter and after he made this decision and started this new life. So this ends my reading of the poem. There are, of course, other verses there that I'm ignoring, but it's okay because I think we've read the main, both more famous and more probably informative part of the poem. What I would just like to add is a few words about the rhythm of the poem. So it's quite complicated to describe in detail what's going on with the poetic meters in general in Persian and in this poem in particular, but I can give you an informal feel of the meter if you haven't already felt it as I was reading it. So what's happening here is that the syllables in Persian poetry can have different lengths. when you say mor and when you say de for the word morde, the two syllables, they have different lengths. And mor, at least in the mind of the speaker, in its most abstract version, mor is twice as long as de. So when you say morde, it's like if the first part is, say, 40 milliseconds, the second part is supposed to be 20 milliseconds. Now, that doesn't happen in real life. This is just to give you an idea of what I mean by different lengths. And this 2-to-1 relationship is always there. And there are some syllables that are 3 units long. The others are 1 unit and 2 unit long, units being the smallest one. And this combination of long and short syllables is what's creating the rhythmic pattern in this poem and in every Persian poem that is metrical. So the beginning of each syllable could be thought as a beat, and the length of the syllable could be thought as the silence following the beat. So the linguistic representation of a rhythm, like a beat pattern like would be morde, bodam, or anything else like zende, shodam. So this is what's been repeated. So this is what's being repeated across the whole poem, dum da da dum. And I would like to emphasize that this has nothing to do with stress, as English speakers expect rhythm to be related to stress. It is not, at least the linguistic stress that you know. Describing how it's different and how it's ultimately related in a very unexpected way is definitely beyond this rather short video. But I'm going to read this first part of the poem, a few verses, just to show you how the rhythm is working. مرده bodam, zende, shodam, gerye, bodam, khande, shodam, dowlat-e eshgh āmad dowlat-e pāyande, shodam. So you see, you can tap to the rhythm. And this is a rhythm that every Persian speaker understands, because Persian speakers have access to this 2-to-1 ratio for the syllables. Now, of course, people usually don't read it in such a rhythmic manner, but they do understand the rhythm even when they're not reading it in that way. So to finish this video, I would like to read the whole thing up to the point that we read once again without any comments or translations. مرده bodam, zende, shodam, gerye, bodam, khande, shodam, دولت اشغ آمد و من دولت پاینده شدم. دیده سیر است مرا، جان دلیر است مرا، زهره شیر است مرا، زهره تابنده شدم. گفت که دیوانه نی، لایق این خانه نی، رفتم و دیوانه شدم، سلسله بندنده شدم. گفت که سرمست نی، رو که از این دست نی، رفتم و سرمست شدم و از طرب آکنده شدم. گفت که تو کشته نی، در طرب آغشته نی، پیش رخ زنده کنش کشته و افکنده شدم. گفت که تو زیرککی، مست خیالی و شکی، گول شدم هول شدم و از همه برکنده شدم. گفت که تو شمع شدی، قبله این جمع شدی، جمع نیم شمع نیم دود پراکنده شدم. گفت که شیخی و سری پیش رو و راهبری، شیخ نیم پیش نیم امر تو را بنده شدم. گفت که با بال و پری من پر و بالت ندهم، در هوس بال و پرش بی پر و پرکنده شدم.